So let us look at the syllabus of your General Studies Paper 3, especially those topics related to economy, internal security and disaster management. So if you look at this syllabus, what we can say is that it covers two important dimensions. One is the conceptual, the second one is mostly practical. Economics is one subject where people find it difficult in terms of understanding the concepts. Unlike say polity or geography or anything else, economics is one subject where they find it difficult, especially those who are from engineering or medical background. Why? Because the subject is not difficult as such. It is mostly about how it is being interpreted by people. It is being how it is being analyzed by people that makes it a little bit more complicated for them. Otherwise, economics is based on simple common sense. It is based on simple common sense. So what we will try to do as part of our classes is we will try to understand all these things in as a simple manner as it is possible, so that you don't have to make any extra effort to read and remember things. And the good thing about economics is that once you understand it, you don't have to worry about anything else. It is one subject where you can put in least amount of effort with maximum gains. It is one subject. That is the facility of this subject. Once you understand it, like mathematics, it becomes almost completely easy for you to write very good answers. Not only thing, in prelims also, this is one topic in your prelims where you can score 100%. Howsoever you read geography or environment, the questions are always bounces for you. You don't know whether to duck under them or hook them for a 6. Most of the time, you will fall on the ground with the ball hitting your head. Whereas with economics, you can easily hit 6s. You can get all questions right. That much guarantee I can give you. 100% accuracy, you can get all the questions right, depending on, because every year UPSC keeps on changing the pattern of your prelims examination. Sometimes 2 years back they have given around 15 to 20 questions from economics or economy. You can say this year the number of questions from economy are very less, 7-8 questions only. So whatever may be the number of questions they are giving, our objective is that we should make sure that we are getting 100% questions right. And in the main examination, if you look at from economy point of view, out of the 20 questions in your paper 3, around 10 questions are from economy. Around 10 questions are from economy. Section A and section B combined it together. And of all the 4 papers of GS, this paper 3 is what history has shown in the last 6 years of UPSC. Is 2013 was the year when they changed the pattern. From 2013 to 2018, if you look at the scores, it is the paper 3 one which normally is highly scoring. Some of our students have scored more than 150 out of 250 also in paper 3. Why? Because this is one paper where with a good amount of knowledge, you can easily score marks. Economy. And the good thing is that the best part of it is that all these 10 questions can be easily predicted, because as you can see the syllabus here, they will be asking questions from only these topics. We can easily predict, and most importantly, there is no ambiguity when it comes to writing answers. In case of other papers of GS, whether it is a little bit of social issues or polity governance or anything else, there can be some kind of ambiguity because you have to analyze the things. Whereas in economics, your answers can be very much clear. When you talk about agrarian reforms, you have to write the same answer. When you talk about PDS reforms, you know what you have to write. When you talk about improving infrastructure, railways, you know what you have to write. And that is the reason why people are getting very good marks also here. Because the answers in economy are like answers in say physics or chemistry or mathematics, where you know clearly what is the answer to the question. There is no ambiguity. And that is the reason why they are getting marks. Same is the case with disaster management or internal security. Because most of the questions are factual based, most of the questions have what you call specific answers. Once you write it the answer, you can expect 60% easily. For a 15 marker, you can expect anything between 9 to 10 marks easily. For a 10 marker, you can easily score 6. And that is the reason why this is one paper where you can easily get marks, provided you have a conceptual clarity. That is what this paper is all about. Next thing is, as I said, why do people find it difficult? People find it difficult for the simple reason that they think that the subject is highly technical in nature. They think that the subject is highly technical in nature. Obviously, when they start this with this assumption that the subject is highly technical in nature, obviously they see a lot of demons when they don't exist at all. And that is where most of the people find it difficult, whether it is in prelims or mains. Let us look at the syllabus of economy. All of you have the syllabus. And this syllabus is framed by UPSC in such a manner that any graduate student, any student who is a graduate, from any discipline should be able to understand the basic aspects about the functioning of the economy and nothing else. They should know what is agriculture, they should know what is infrastructure, what is transportation. They should know basic things, because that is what the objective of education. The objective of education is to develop that kind of knowledge which is necessary for us to live, which is necessary for us to ensure better living. That is what UPSC is looking at. They are not looking at you to think like an economist, think like a policy maker, think like a person who studied economics for 20-30 years, a professional economist. They are asking you to think like a common man on the ground and come out with simple practical solutions to the problems. And that is the reason why all the questions that UPSC has been asking in the last 6 years or so from economy, they are not at all what you call technical in nature. Very simple analytical questions. So first topic of our syllabus, Indian economy, issues relating to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. So when we talk about economy, what are you talking about? We are talking about different aspects of economic system. We are talking about different aspects. We are talking about the functioning of markets. You are talking about planning. You are talking about growth and development. You are talking about employment. You are talking about this investment. Where does the government get money? How does the government improve infrastructure? These are all the basic things, and that is what the first topic of our syllabus is all about. It gives you basic understanding about the functioning of our economy. Macro perspective, basic understanding, macro perspective, basic understanding in the form of all these things. As we proceed, when we study this planning, even though we have discontinued with planning commission, even though we have replaced Planning Commission with Niti Aayog, planning is always an integral part of any economic system, whether it is public sector or private sector. Planning is an integral part. What is this planning and why this planning is required? How this planning has evolved over a period of time. That is what this topic talks about. And as we have said, what is required for growth and development is always resources. This is what we say, whether you have a capitalist economy or a socialist economy, the only way a country can develop is through investment. And where does this investment come from? How can the government raise resources? What are the different avenues available to the government to raise resources which are necessary for growth and development? Not only for the government, the resources are needed for private sector also. So how can this private sector also raise resources? When you talk about economy, you are talking about two important players. One is the government, second one is the private sector. How can they raise their resources? What are the problems in raising resources? What are the hurdles in raising resources? Why a developing country like India finds it extremely difficult to raise these resources? That is what this topic talks about. How to mobilize resources internally, externally, through various sources. This is what, so we'll have to analyze, see how these resources can be raised and what are the bottlenecks and what can be done in the future. As I said, the only way a country can progress is through investment. Next, as a question, growth and development and employment. Basically, every country looks for increasing its economic growth. We want to grow at 9% per annum. But what are the issues in related to growth? Is why it is not possible, or why we are not able to grow at 9% per annum? What is the reason why our economy is in a recession? What is the reason why we are witnessing global economic slowdown, as IMF talks about? Why we are witnessing global economic slowdown? So what are the obstacles to this growth and development? Growth is different from development. Development, we say, is multidimensional in nature. So, as part of development, you will be talking about different aspects of development. You are talking about inclusive growth. You are talking about inclusive growth, inclusive and equitable growth. Almost invariably, every year in your economy paper, mains, questions are always related to this growth and development. And as part of this growth and development, you are talking about employment, what is called job-led growth. Since 1991, when we liberalized, whatever the governments have done successive, they could not achieve this job-led growth. That is the biggest failure of the liberalization process in India. The biggest failure is our inability to provide jobs to people. So that is the reason why, again, every year you have lots of questions about this jobless growth. And last year it was asked for essay also to 125 marks. Why? Because there is no point in ensuring a rapid economic growth without providing jobs to the people. It results only in what you call widening inequalities. Rich people will become richer and poor people poorer. We will not have what we call inclusive growth. So how to ensure this jobs, how to create employment. That is what the essence of this topic. That is the reason why you can see, whenever the government documents come out, economic survey or anything else, they always talk about, what are the measures that can be taken to ensure job-led growth, instead of what the situation that we have now, what is called jobless growth. That is what the first topic. It gives basically what you call bird's eye view of the entire syllabus. When you look at the second topic, inclusive growth and issues arising from it, again, as I said, that economic growth is necessary but not sufficient. What is required is inclusive growth. And what is this inclusive growth? How this inclusive growth can be realized, and what are the challenges to inclusive growth? As we are saying, we keep on saying, rich people are becoming richer, poor people are becoming poorer. Capitalism, one of the basic problems with capitalism is that capitalism can ensure growth, but can never realize the objectives of inclusive growth. That is where the problem. So then what can be done? What should be done to ensure inclusive growth? What are the problems? What are the challenges? And tomorrow if you are a policy maker, what kind of suggestions can you give to inclusive growth? That is what the question. Of course, every year in your paper 3, one question will always be related to inclusive growth. The question can be about inclusive growth from the point of view of balanced regional development. It can inclusive growth from the point of view of job-led growth. Inclusive growth from the point of view of developing agriculture. Inclusive growth from the point of view of reducing income inequalities in the income inequalities. Inclusive growth from the point of view of gender or social development, basically providing opportunities for weaker sections of society. So this is what inclusive growth we talk about. Next topic of our syllabus is government budgeting. Government budgeting. So when we talk about this government budgeting, what are the different ways in which the government finances its budgets? What are the ways in which the government spends its money? What can be done to ensure better budgeting on the part of the government? Sometimes the questions can be about gender budgeting. Sometimes question can be about expenditure management. Sometimes question can be about zero-based budgeting. So they can ask all these kind of questions when it comes to government budgeting. And what kind of reforms that can be implemented in government budgeting? What are the reforms that can be implemented? So this is basically a theoretical as well as a practical aspects. How to raise the resources by the for the government, and how to improve the spending of the government. What are the budgetary reforms? It can be in the form of expenditure reforms, or it can be in the form of improving the revenues of the government. But the real practical syllabus starts with the next chapter. If 10 questions are asked every year, at least 4 to 5 questions are only from agriculture. Every year. You can see the trend in the past 5 or 6 years. 4 to 5 questions are only from agriculture. So if you have to do well in your economy paper, you must be thorough with all aspects of agriculture. You should know everything about agriculture. When I say everything about agriculture, you should know about all the practical aspects related to agriculture, not the theoretical ones. All practical aspects related to agriculture. So what are we talking about as part of agriculture? When we are talking about agriculture, we have to think about the historical aspects. Historically, what kind of agriculture we have, and what are the changes that have taken place in our agriculture since independence and before that also. Then we have to discuss about each and every component of agriculture. What are different components? Starting with land holdings. For agriculture, what is required? We have to look at each and every aspect of them. Then irrigation. Then seeds. Then fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides. All these are all, as I said, practical aspects. What a farmer faces at the ground level. Next, credit. You require money. agricultural credit. Then, of course, monsoon. Indian agriculture is always a gamble with a monsoon. Then, what are different kinds of crops that we have? Kharif and Rabi and other types of crops. Then, you have to talk about this green revolution, all kinds of revolutions, green revolution, blue revolution, and all kinds of revolutions in agriculture sector. You have to talk about all of them, how those revolutions have changed. Then you have to talk about storage facilities, warehouses and cold storage houses. Then you have to talk about marketing. You have to talk about marketing. Then you have to talk about prices, agricultural prices, minimum support price and other things. Then you have to talk about insurance, agricultural insurance. Then you have to talk about these GM crops, genetically modified crops, GM crops. Then nowadays people are talking about organic farming, and then this zero budget natural farming. Then you have to talk about food processing industries, and you have to talk about agriculture and allied activities, animal husbandry, then dairy farming, animal husbandry, dairy farming. Then you have to talk about dry land agriculture. Dry land agriculture. Then you have to talk about extension services to farmers, agriculture extension services to farmers. Then you have to talk about what Swaminathan calls it as a evergreen revolution. Evergreen revolution. Then in agriculture, you have to talk about the linkage between agriculture and industry. You can talk about contract farming or corporate farming, cooperative farming. You have to talk about all of them. Then you have to talk about technology and agriculture. How technology can be used in agriculture by our farmers. Different types of technology. Then you have to talk about agriculture from the point of view of political economy. That is, agriculture as a subject that is influencing union-state relations also. Union-state relations also. Center-state relations. Talking about from all dimensions. Then you have to talk about food security as part of extension. As part of food security, you are talking about PDS reforms. As part of your food security, you will be talking about PDS reforms. So then, as part of allied activities, agriculture, animal husbandry, You talk about fisheries also. Fisheries. So this is what it is all about. That is the reason why, as I said, that if you have to talk about economy, means you are only talking about agriculture. Almost 40 to 50% of the questions in your main examination is only from agriculture. And as I said, you must be having in-depth knowledge about all these aspects. In the last 5-6 years, if you see the questions, they never go beyond these things. If you know all these things, then it means that you are covering 50% of your syllabus. And this is the most important and I would not say difficult, but most important part of your syllabus. But again, to learn, to understand all these things, you must develop love for this subject, agriculture. Because tomorrow, when you get into services, you are posted in the districts, mostly in rural areas. Obviously, this agriculture becomes the most important activity. You must have complete understanding of this agriculture. What are the different types of soil in the country that we have? What are the different crops that are being grown in different parts of the country? And as we say, agriculture is a part of our culture. That is what we say. It is part of our India's culture. Everything, from the point of view of society is defined in terms of culture. All the festivals also you can see are celebrated towards the end of these seasons. Towards the end of Kharif season, you have all these festivals that we are celebrating now. Towards the end of Rabi season, we will celebrate more festivals. Everything in rural area, rural economy is related to agriculture. In spite of the fact that the contribution of agriculture in our GDP has come down drastically over a period of time. Agriculture sustains Indian economy from both the demand and supply sides. The present recession can be traced to agrarian crisis. Because of agrarian crisis, there is no rural demand, which is resulting in recession. So from demand side, from supply side, obviously, because you can see right now what is happening. The prices of onions are going up. The prices of vegetables are going up. And all this, this inflation, that is what we call food inflation, is always a very serious issue for the government. What is called headline inflation. It is always a very serious issue. So we have to discuss all these things. We have to discuss all these things. As you can see here, 4 topics. The next 4 topics about only what we have mentioned here in our syllabus. Major cropping patterns in various parts of the country, different types of irrigation and irrigation systems, storage, transport and marketing of agricultural produce and issues and related constraints. E-technology in the aid of farmers. Issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies and minimum support prices. Public distribution system, objectives, functioning, limitations, revamping, issues related to buffer stocks and food security, technology missions, economics of animal dairy, food processing industries and related industries in India, scope and significance, location, upstream and downstream requirements, supply chain management, land reforms in India. All these 4 topics, are related to what, we have mentioned here. That is why, as I said, that 50% of our questions are asked only from this topic, agriculture. You have to study right from what happened during the British times till the present day developments in agriculture. What is the reason why farmers are committing suicide in different parts of the country? Why the country is facing agrarian crisis? Why farmers are committing suicide? The basic problem for farmers in India is that if there is overproduction, it will bring tears to them. If there is scarcity in production, again it will bring tears to them. Agriculture is the only profession in India which is being managed completely by private individuals. Why globalization has not impacted agriculture at all? Why? Because agriculture is completely privately managed. Why globalization has benefited industry? Because industry can get huge amount of incentives from the government. Farmer is the only professional in India who cannot decide the price of his product. Farmer is the only professional who cannot decide the price of his product. If a Mukesh Ambani is producing something and government says that your price of your product will be determined by us, will he? Obviously not. But farmer is the only professional in India who cannot decide the price of his product. Who will decide the price? It will be decided by the government at what price to sell. That is the reason why agriculture in India is still completely facing all kinds of problems, because farmers simply, even though it is completely privately managed, they don't have any independence. They cannot sell their output produce to anyone else. Their output, they can only sell it to government. They cannot export. The government will not allow them to export. Recently you can see the prices of onions went up. Immediately what did the government do? The government banned. On the other hand, if the prices of other products go up, the government will encourage the producers to export them. That is where farmers face a delicate situation. If there is overproduction, then the prices will fall and farmers will be the losers. If there is a scarcity of production, prices will go up. Government will not allow them to sell. Either way, they cannot benefit. Right now, because of these excess rains in Maharashtra and other places where onion produce is there is scarcity of production. Obviously, the prices went up. Will the farmers, are the farmers allowed to benefit out of increasing prices? No. Immediately government has imposed curbs on them. Government has said that you cannot store your produce, you cannot export your produce. You have to sell the produce only at the prices that we determine. Why this kind of double standards? When it comes to industrial sector, when the prices go up, government says that please go and export the things. Will the government put any kind of price on the services of this infotech industry, information technology? Will the government put any kind of price on the services of on the goods provided by other manufacturing industry? No, they will not. But when it comes to only agriculture, government will fix everything. That is where the problem. And that is why Indian farmer always lives in a situation of crisis. Whether it is excess production, it will bring tears to them. Whether it is scarcity of production, again it will bring tears to them. And one more thing, farmer is the only producer who will not sell the product directly to consumers. He is the only producer who will not sell directly to the consumers. Either he will be selling his produce to the government, or he will be selling it to the middlemen. It is the middlemen who make, for example, there's at present in Delhi, tomato prices are around 55 rupees. And you go to any farmer, he will be willing to sell the same for 2 rupees or 3 rupees. At the farmer's level, it is only 2 or 3 rupees. Maximum it can be 5 rupees. And when it comes to final consumer, it is 55 rupees. Who will benefit out of this 50 rupees? That is where the government is not able to do anything. They are not able to benefit. It is as simple as that one. Whereas, you cannot allow industrial sector to do those kind of things. Industrial sector, industries, they always, fix everything on their own. In the industrial sector, prices are always determined on the basis of demand and supply. And farmers, they cannot fix the prices. There cannot be any middlemen also. There cannot be any direct connection between the producer and the consumers. That is where the problem. That is the root of all agrarian crisis in India. No government has a conviction to solve the fundamental issues related to agriculture. Similarly, as I said, insurance. Farmers don't have any insurance. Why? Because why would insurance companies insure the produce? When they insure the output, they will lose out. Why? Because from the point of sowing seeds till harvesting, it is full of uncertainty. Full of uncertainties. So will the insurance companies come forward and invest? Obviously not. So farmers are left to fend themselves. And land holdings, you name it, everything related here, whatever we have mentioned here, all these things are problematic. Everything is problematic. The government does not have the patience, nor vision, nor commitment to find permanent solutions to all these problems. So what does the government to do? They always come out with the short-term populistic solutions in the form of subsidies, in the form of schemes like Kisan, income support. That is what the government should do. They don't have as I said, the government, agriculture is the only sector that did not benefit out of liberalization. The only sector that benefited out of liberalization was service sector. The sector that did not benefit out of liberalization in the last 28 years is agriculture, because they are not allowed to sell their produce. Government imposes huge amount of restrictions on exports. They are not allowed to sell their produce within the country or even outside the country. Especially since BJP came to power in 2014, their objective is to control food inflation. That is the reason why the BJP government did not increase MSP also, minimum support prices also. Of course, increase in MSP will not benefit the farmers as such, but they never really bother to increase MSP because it will impact inflation. The government knows that if food inflation is very high, they will lose power. If the choice is between farmers, the producers, and the people, consumers, government always looks at consumers. Whereas in case of industry and service sector, government always looks to protect the interests of producers. That is where the difference. Of course, every government that comes to power always talks about welfare of farmers, without really understanding what do they mean by welfare of farmers. So we will be discussing, we will be spending a lot of time on all these things. As I said, mostly at the ground level, practical aspects are what that is important. UPSC is focusing on practical aspects, not the theoretical ones which we find in the textbooks. Next, the next topic in our syllabus is effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy, and their effects on industrial growth. So once, when you talk about economy, we divide that into three different sectors. This economy is divided into three different sectors, and our syllabus covers all those three sectors. Primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. Primary sector basically talks about agriculture and allied activities. Agriculture and for dairy farming and fisheries, forests, everything else. Secondary sector basically industrial sector. It includes industrial and within industrial sector manufacturing also, very important. Secondary sector. That is what the syllabus of this topic, effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy and their effects on industrial growth. Especially from 1991 onwards, what kind of changes we have made to our industrial policies, how they have impacted our growth and development. That is what this syllabus talks about, this topic talks about. industrialization and how this industrialization. And then as part of this topic, we'll be talking about what are the challenges faced by industries now, what are the problems, what are the major policies of the government, and whether those policies have been successful or not, and what can be done. And as part of this, we will be talking about different industries also, specific industries also. Basically, you will be talking about manufacturing sector, then you will be talking about MSMEs, you will be talking about MSMEs, you will be talking about different industries like iron and steel industry, coal, power. Like this, we will talk about what you call the core industries. How many of them are there, core industries? 8 of them are there. You have to look at all of them. And next topic is infrastructure. It includes all these core industries. Infrastructure. Infrastructure includes energy, ports, roads, airports and railways. Energy, you are talking about different forms of energy, thermal energy, hydel and solar energy. So you have to talk about what are the changes that have taken place in recent times. You have to talk about what are the policies of the government in this regard. And most importantly, you are talking about the reforms in all these sectors. For example, power sector reforms. The government introduced the scheme Uday, and last year the government introduced Uday 2 also as an extension of Uday scheme, and Saubhagya scheme to make a country energy surplus country. When 11th 5-year plan identified power sector was the most critical sector, India was facing a huge amount of deficiency in power sector. But now we have become power surplus country. How did this transformation take place? What are the problems with the PPAs, power purchase agreements? In some of the states, most of the states are facing these problems. Recently, 4-5 South Indian states have met, and they started meeting with the central government regarding PPAs, contracts and everything else. So you have to talk about all of them. What are the problems? Then ports, obviously very important part of transportation infrastructure. So you talk about major ports, minor ports, inland waterways, and then Sagarmala projects, and why this sector is not as developed as it should be in India, in spite of the fact that India has a huge number of waterways in the country, wherein this water transportation in terms of cost, it is the lowest compared to other forms of transportation, whether it is rail, road or air. In terms of per kilometer cost, is the lowest, and it is also environment friendly compared to other forms of transportation. But why? What is the problem related to this ports in India? What is the capacity and what is capacity utilization at this point of time? What are the problems and what are the steps taken by the government? The Sagarmala project is there, and whether it has been implemented or not. All those things are very important. Then roads. As we have said, you talk about all forms of transportation, water, road, rail, airways, everything. So again, as part of road transportation, you are talking about Bharatmala project, you are talking about NHDP, National Highway Development Program, the pet project of Vajpayee government, and then what is the present status in relation to Golden Quadrilateral, and the BJP government had come out with another project linking northeastern states to the rest of the country as part of Bharatmala phase 1 and Bharatmala phase 2. So you have to talk about all these things. And the good part of it is that whenever we are doing all these things, we will be covering good number of questions in your prelims. That is what you must remember. Good number of questions in your prelims. Because in your prelims, all these topics, the last 4 topics, you are covering in a good number of questions. Because if you say that this is part of geography, it is geography. If you say that it is part of economy, it is economy. But only thing is that if you know the answer, that is more than enough. It does not really matter whether it is geography or economy. Or you can say as a midway solution, economic geography. That is what we can accept. So that those who are from economics background and geography background are not offended. That is what we say here, infrastructure. Similarly, airports, lots of developments had taken place after liberalization, 1991 in airports. The government had come out with so many rules, 525, like that it had come out with so many rules. It had opted for FDI in airports also, modernization. It has allowed foreign airlines to come and fly in the country. And there are so many developments that had taken place. In spite of all the developments, airport industry, airports, airlines are facing so many problems. Most of them have collapsed in the last few years. Air India had collapsed long time back, and private airlines also. Starting with Deccan Airlines, it was the first to go out. Then Kingfisher, then Sahara, then Jet Airways. All of them have collapsed one by one. Why? What is the reason why? What can be done? At present, Air India is running only because of the government financial support. And there are 2 other major airlines. One is Indigo and second one is SpiceJet. Otherwise, there is no competition because most of the airlines have collapsed. AirAsia had come up, but their services are not as frequent as that of other other airlines. What is the problem with airlines industry in India? All those things we have to look at. And of course, finally, the railways. The most important form of transport in India for people of the country. They connect the entire country, railways. What are the problems with the railways? The railways have appointed so many commissions. Those commissions had come out with so many recommendations. Some of them have talked about privatization of railways also, at least some of the routes, which you can see in today's newspaper also, the recommendations. So you have to talk about all the problems related to railways. When you talk about problems related to railways, we say that they are divided into 3 categories. One is technical issues related to production and raw material and technology and everything. Second one is managerial issues. Railways have excess staff, managerial issues. Because of too many departments that are there in railways, there is always a conflict between those departments. Third one is financial issues. Vivek Dobroy committee had suggested changes, suggested reforms in all these 3 aspects of railways. So we will have to look at all of them. We also have to look at what economic survey had to say about all these things. So this is what the syllabus, but what the syllabus does not mention is also very important for us. The syllabus does not mention about fiscal policies. It does not talk about monetary policies. The syllabus does not talk about fiscal policy, monetary policy, public finance. It does not talk about public finance. It does not talk about international trade and finance. International trade and finance. Syllabus also does not explicitly talk about service sector. It also does not explicitly talk about the service sector. It also does not mention about public sector enterprise. And it also does not talk about explicitly banking. Reserve Bank, commercial banks and all kinds of banking. It also does not talk about informal economy. Informal economy, Hundi system and money lenders and others. It does not talk about informal economy. It also does not talk about this political economy. Political economy. Political economy in the form of center-state financial relations, Finance Commission, Niti Aayog, Finance Commission, Niti Aayog, and policies of the state governments, economic policies of state governments. It does not talk about these things. And the syllabus also does not explicitly talk about inflation. It does not talk about inflation. It does not talk about the subsidies directly. It talks about only farm subsidies but not other types of subsidies given to industrial sector. It does not talk about tax structures, tax reforms. This year GST question was asked. Since you cannot say that it is not mentioned in the syllabus, so you cannot write answers. It does not talk about all these things. So all these things also you have to study as part of this syllabus. So the question is what are the sources? What are the sources for you for this paper? What are the sources? You can take a standard book, Indian Economy by Mishra and Puri. Latest edition you can go through. It can be your standard book where the entire syllabus you can find in that book. Apart from the ones which are mentioned, those things which are not mentioned also, like the ones which we have talked about. You can find everything from this book, Indian Economy by Mishra and Puri. Then you can take any economics dictionary, meaning of all the terms, Oxford Dictionary of Economics. As and when you find any term, you can always go through that to find out the meaning. Then next important is economic survey. Economic survey. Not only this year's economic survey, at least previous 3 years of economic survey. From the year of the examination where you write, 3 years. So you will be writing for say 2020. So 2020 economic survey, 2019 as well as 18. 3 years of economic survey is important. Not 1 year, 3 years. Next, you have to go through budgets, again past 3 years. As I said, 2020, 19 and 18. You have to go through the budgets also. Then, of course, every day, this newspaper. Take any 1 or 2 newspapers. You don't have to read economic newspapers. You don't have to go through Economic Times or Business Standard. That's not required for UPSC. And Economic Times is not related to economy, it is related to finance. Finance is different from economics. So Economic Times is not required. Any traditional newspaper like Hindu or Indian Express, the business page is more than sufficient. It will give you all the latest economic developments. This is what you can say, or the study material. Of course, in the class, we will be covering all these things extensively. And I will also be giving you, important, information from some of these sources. For example, Niti Aayog reports are there. Niti Aayog reports, and RBI annual reports. They provide a good factual basis. This is what is the study material. And how much time do we need? How much time do we need to do all these things? We require around, say, 25 days to all these things. Around 25 days to cover your entire economy, both from your prelims as well as mains point of view. We need around 25 days. So with around 2.5 hours, we require around 25 days. That is what is the plan for this. And the other two topics disaster management and internal security. And from disaster management and internal security, UPSC is asking, these are all topics which are there only purely in mains. They are not part of prelims. Sometimes they are asking questions in prelims also, factual questions. They are asking around, from these topics around 5 questions, 5 to 6 questions. Science and technology, they are asking around 4 questions. That is how 20 questions are distributed, 6 questions. So when we talk about disaster management, basically, the syllabus can be defined in specific terms. So on one hand, you have to look at the theoretical aspects of disaster management. All theoretical aspects of disaster management, which we can find in a second year's report on crisis management. All theoretical aspects of disaster management, which we can find in second year's report on crisis management. Then you have to focus on the practical aspects of disaster management. So you have to talk about different types of disasters. All disasters, cyclones, floods, landslides, earthquakes, and deforestation. Then other natural disasters like this one, forest fires. Then related to seas, this one, salinity, increasing salinity. This recently, this year also a question was asked about illegal sand mining. These are all practical ones which we find in our day-to-day life. So for all these things, what we must do is that we must prepare small notes for everything, because UPSC will not go beyond these things for disaster management. So what you have to do, we have to collect facts related to them. We have to analyze the consequences of all these disasters. We have to talk about the policy measures of the government. We have to talk about the policy measures taken by the government. And we have to talk about the reasons for failure of those policies and what can be done. And what can be done. Very specific. Very, very specific. So for every topic, we are preparing around 1000 words, because in the examination you have to write only 250 words. So what is the point of studying 100 pages when you have to write only 250 words? That is where intelligence should come into play. You are not going to be a geographer to talk about all these things in more in-depth manner. We need only these things from the point of view of disaster management. So that is the reason why you will have to be very specific. Similarly, you can talk about man-made disasters. These man-made disasters will be part of this internal security and the last topic, internal security. Man-made disasters will be part of this last topic, internal security. So what are the man-made disasters which we are talking about as part of internal security? We are talking about all those disasters, whether it is terrorism, Naxalism, cross-border migration, illegal migration, cross-border management, then cyber security, then communalism, then caste-based conflicts, then regionalism, then secessionist movements in specific parts of the country. In Northeast, you have to talk about every state in Northeast and talk about their problems specifically. Every state in Northeast. Then you have Jammu and Kashmir. Then you have to talk about terror finance, financial crimes. Earlier we were talking about cyber crimes. Now we are talking about financial crimes. Then you have to talk about various police organizations involved. Then you have to talk about drug issue, drugs, and how this drug issue is related to terrorism, how this drug money is used to finance terrorism, the linkage between drug money and terrorism. Then you have to talk about the recent institutions and laws like NIA, UAPA, these things. And again, for this topic, as I said, for each and every topic, you are not preparing more than 1000 words. Around 2 pages, maximum 2-3 pages. So your internal security, the entire notes will be around say 20-25 pages, not more than that. You are not reading anything more than this. UPSC will not go beyond this. Internal security will be around 25-30 pages. Disaster management will be around 25-30 pages. And UPSC will not go beyond this. And you will definitely score, as I said, 150 out of 250. And your entire economy notes also should not be more than 100 pages. It cannot be more than 100 pages. 10 questions, 100 pages are more than enough. It will not be more than 100 pages. Whatever that we talked about, all the problems of agriculture, right from land holdings to credit to pesticides to marketing to insurance to agro processing industries to food security, every topic it will not be more than, as I said, 750 words. You have to be as precise as you can. If you read less, you can remember more and you will reproduce more also. On the other hand, if you are reading 1000 pages, there are two ways to satisfy your materialistic desires. I can dictate 1000 pages You will feel happy. You will have tears in your eyes. My God, this person has so much of patience, so much of notes. I'll become a great dictator. Everyone is happy. That is one way. The second way is optimization. That is what we study in statistics. Maximization and optimization. You can realize your objectives by working to maximum possible extent, putting all your energies, resources, time and everything. Or you can optimize it. Optimizing it means minimum resources and maximum output. That is what you have to decide. I prefer the other one. Whatever you want, I will do it. What you want? You will say that give us only 10 pages. Too much of optimization. Right? So otherwise, as I said, in agriculture we talked about so many topics. But the time to discuss those topics will not be as much as the time taken to mention those topics also. That is what you must remember. Because all of them are interrelated. And you have to be very specific. For example, when we discuss about land holdings, you have to simply talk about simple facts. What is the average size of land holding in India? What it was in 1950s? What it is in now? Why this fragmentation of land holdings has taken place? And what is the consequence of this fragmentation of land holdings? More importantly, this distribution of land holdings. 89% of the farmers own less than 2 acres of land. Distribution of land holdings. And what is the impact? It is over, simple. And what is the solution? That is what M.S. Swaminathan talks about. He says that there is no point in talking about land reforms now. If we had implemented them in 1950s, it would have been better. If we are talking about them now, it is a useless exercise. That is what he says. We don't require land reforms. He says what we need is asset reforms. He comes out with very innovative solutions. So we have to talk about all those innovative solutions. That is the reason why we require, cooperative farming in India is a failure. We will discuss why cooperative farming is a failure. The question was asked 3 years back. And that is the reason why we are talking about contract farming, which again is a failure. It has resulted in absentee landlordism. It has resulted in tenancy farming. And that is the reason why you are talking about now corporate farming. So you have to talk about all these different types of farming. As I said that it will not take much of time because all these things we can see in front of our eyes. Similarly, irrigation. Very simple. The basic problem is that we focus only on major irrigation projects. And they did not provide irrigation facilities to all the farmers, especially small and marginal farmers. Only 40%. Government says 45% of our land is irrigated. 55% is not irrigated. They are depending mostly on bore wells, tube wells. It is resulting in a drastic decline in water tables due to excessive exploitation of land, exploitation of water, thanks to green revolution. Everything is interlinked. That is what Swaminathan says. He says that this green revolution had turned itself into greed revolution. Farmers had become greedy. They are exploiting everything. They are exploiting land. They are exploiting water. They are exploiting these fertilizers, chemicals, everything. Greed revolution. They want more. And that is the reason why it has failed also. We cannot sustain it. So you have to talk about all these things. Again, all of them are linked to credit, agricultural credit. Only 60% of small and marginal farmers have access to, not 60%, 40% of small and marginal farmers have access to institutional credit. That is, they can take loans from banks. So whenever the government writes off the loans, who will benefit? Only the big farmers. Small and marginal farmers will not benefit. Why? Because they are taking loans from the money lenders. In spite of the fact that as part of banking sector reforms, as part of Jan Dhan, The government talked about universal banking, it has not been achieved. In spite of the implementation of Jan Dhan, only 55% of our country have access to banks, institutional credit. So you have to talk about all these things. Similarly, marketing facilities. As I said, these, when you talk about agriculture marketing facilities, it is being done by the government only. Government only buys the grains from the farmers, food grains from the farmers, through these FCI godowns and through agricultural cooperatives at the district level. And these agricultural cooperatives, you can say, are the most corrupt. Small farmers can never go to these mandis, agricultural mandis, and sell their produce there. They are forced to sell their produce to the middleman, who buys them at very cheap rates and sell them again in these mandis at the minimum support price fixed by the government. They are the ones who will benefit out of it. The government has set up these marketing committees, AIIMS, Agriculture Product Marketing Committees. But the government never really made sure that small and marginal farmers can benefit out of these marketing committees because of politicization and corruption. Everything is interrelated. And similarly, when it comes to this genetically modified crops, GM crops, BT cotton, BT brinjal, and other thing, the government still does not have any clear idea about these things. On the one hand, BT cotton experiment is successful because we are able to increase the production. But again, they are facing so many problems in all those places where farmers have used this BT cotton, because the crops have become more susceptible to this virus, these BT cotton crops, and farmers are losing huge amount of crop also to this virus. Why? Because of this. And government is yet to find a solution to that. And the problem is that research, agriculture research in India is mostly absent. And most of the time, the research that takes place is not linked to ground level farming. We have Indian Agriculture Research Institutes are there. We also have POSA here. But the problem is that those who conduct the research, normally they are so far away from the actual farmers at the ground level. They conduct the research, and the fruits of research do not go down to the lowest level. That is what again Swaminathan talks about. What happened in 1960s and what is happening now. So that is the reason why farmers have lots of apprehensions about these GM crops. Why? Because they don't have any what you call extension services. If they have any problem, they don't know whom to approach. And that is the reason why they are suspicious about these things. And then similarly, transportation facilities. As the question that has been asked also, you must improve transportation facilities. You must improve connectivity. You have Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana is there, but again the problem is that all these programs are initiated but they are never implemented. We don't have what we call all weather roads in rural areas. All weather roads are not there in rural areas. There is no connectivity. Since there is no connectivity, the farmers cannot bring their produce to these mandis also, APMCs. They are forced to sell. It is a vicious cycle how it takes place among farmers in India. If you can understand this vicious cycle and interlinkages, he'll be writing beautiful answers. What is the vicious cycle here? When you start with the farmers, it starts with the small land holdings, 2 acres, less than 2 acres, very small land holdings. And it is such a small land holding, obviously the output they get is also not sufficient. That is what we say. Our Indian farmer is a net buyer of food grains. Whatever that output, 2 acres of land, how much will you get? And then, since it is very small, they don't get any credit also. They don't have any bank accounts, they don't get any credit. Since they don't get any credit, they have to take money from money lenders. And since it is very small, they cannot use only any of modern gadgets also, modern equipment also. Tractors, crushers, they cannot use them, since land holdings are very small. In 2 acres of land, what will you do with a tractor? Tractor, when you start the tractor, your land, boundaries will come. That is what, they cannot use any modern equipment. Since they are not able to use modern equipment, their productivity is very less. Their productivity is very less. And then they don't have any storage facilities. They cannot store the food grains. The amount of food grains that we produce every year, and the storage facilities are there available only for around 1/4 of food grains, 25%. Remaining 75% we don't know. They have to store it in open sky, under open sky. So it is the rats and everyone else who will eat those food grains. They don't have any storage facilities. They don't have any what we call warehousing facilities. And then since there is no transportation, since they are taking from money lenders, they are forced to sell their produce to middlemen. They are forced to sell their produce to middlemen. Why? Because who are these middlemen? These money lenders will be the middlemen. And these money lenders will their produce at very cheap rates, and they will take this to the mandis, APMCs, and they are the ones who will benefit out of it. They are the ones who will benefit out of it. And as I said, Indian farmer is a net buyer, so MSP also do not benefit them. As we have said, MSP also will not benefit. Only 6% of our farmers benefit out of MSP. MSP also do not benefit them. And since they don't have any irrigation facilities, they will not have any insurance also. Insurance companies will not insure their produce. There is no insurance also. How can insurance companies insure against monsoon? And monsoon is also the problem here. This year, when we say that we had more than 100% monsoon surplus, it is only partially true. Why? Because most of the areas of the country have received deficient monsoon. Excess monsoon we have seen only in some eastern part of the country and some of the western parts of the country. Southern part of the country it is deficiency, and northwestern part of the country, Haryana, Punjab, Delhi, western UP, this is where monsoon is deficient. So the problem is that monsoon never comes on time, and whatever the monsoon, it will always be deficient. Third, it always comes only when it is not required. Once entire thing is over in a harvesting season, you look at it every year in the month of February and March, early March, this water rain will come, uninvited guest. That is what happens. So everything related to agriculture is a problematic one. All of them. As I said, it is a vicious cycle. Everything related to agriculture. Again, the policies of the government add more to this problem. Government announces MSP for 23 crops, 23 plus 1. Sugarcane also was added recently. It announces MSP for 24 crops, but it gives only for 2 crops, rice and wheat. And both rice and wheat, they require huge amount of water. That is the reason why in dry land areas also we have these crops that are being produced. And it is impacting the environment also. Degradation, environmental degradation. So everything, and since agriculture is a state subject, Agriculture is a state subject. We never find any kind of cooperation between the center and states. We have a agriculture ministry at the central level. And then another problem with this fertilizers. The government has this fertilizers, everything is under the control of central government. State governments keep on asking the central government, give us more fertilizers. And every year, the fertilizer subsidy is 80,000 crores. But the farmers never get these fertilizers on time. And the problem with the composition of these fertilizers also, what we call it as NPK ratio. NPK ratio, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. And as part of green revolution, we focus more on urea. We focus more on urea. And NPK ratio is highly skewed. And that is this highly skewed nature of this NPK ratio, urea fertilizers, as Swaminathan talks about, has resulted in increasing salinity of soil. Soil is losing its fertility. Farmers, since this urea fertilizers are given them at subsidized rates, they are using it more. It is increasing salinity of the soil. Ideal NPK ratio is 4:2:1. But in India, it is, I think, 8:4:1, I think, something like that. 8:4:1. So obviously, this is another issue. And the most important problem is, since the 1980s onwards, government's intervention in agriculture has come down drastically, especially public investment in agriculture has come down drastically. What is public investment in agriculture? Public investment in agriculture basically means we talk about irrigation, we talk about warehouses, we talk about cold storage houses, we talk about transportation, we talk about communication. This has come down drastically since 1980s onwards. This is one of the important reasons why globalization could not benefit our farmers. It could not benefit our farmers. And added to all these problems, we have a huge amount of disguised unemployment in agriculture. Disguised unemployment in agriculture. Combining all these things, we have a huge amount of disguised unemployment in agriculture. So everything is related to agriculture is a problematic one. That is what we call systematic and systemic. The problem related to agriculture is systemic in nature. So you require structural reforms. You need meaningful structural reforms. The government does not have, as I said, either time or patience. So the government always comes out with short-term solutions. So the government has said that they wanted to double farmers' income in 5 years. Doubling of farmers' income in 5 years. What kind of income does the government does not talk about? Is it a real income or nominal income? Nominal income will always be doubled all the time in 5 years, provided the government increases the MSPs. Is it real income or nominal income, or is it related to opportunity cost? The government does not talk about these things. Why? Because when the government calculates the income of farmers, MSPs, they will not take into consideration opportunity cost. So these are all the problems. And then most of the time, these agricultural policies of the government are always hijacked by rich and influential farmers, landlords. Agricultural policies of the government are always hijacked by rich and influential farmers. And added to this, because of huge amount of increase in population since independence, we have seen further fragmentation of land holdings because of increase in population. We have seen further fragmentation of land holdings, further division of land holdings. Average size of land holding is getting reduced. And then the most important problem, as Swaminathan talks about, is agriculture is not a profession that is sought after by young people in our country. It is not a profession for young people in our country. No young person in our country wants to take up agriculture as a profession. That means the ethos of our society are changing. The values, traditions and customs and cultures of our society are changing. A farmer's son is not willing to become a farmer. Nobody wants agriculture. Of course, people in urban areas don't know anything about agriculture. They don't know anything about the problems of farmers. That is what Swaminathan says. Rural areas, people are losing interest in agriculture because agriculture has become highly unproductive for them. They wanted to get out of agriculture. Nobody wants to be there in agriculture. It is not a profession. It has sociological consequences also, as he talks about, Swaminathan. He says that farmers are not able to get any proper marriage alliances also. Sociological consequences. They are not able to get grooms also, brides also. Why? Because nobody wants to give their daughters to a farmer. Everything else, all of them are interlinked. Unless we find solutions to all these problems combined together, we cannot make agriculture a productive activity. They are not able to get a proper brides also. That is what he says. And of course, urban educated people simply do not have any interest in agriculture. That is what he says. In people in rural areas, they don't want agriculture. Is there any scope of people from urban areas? Again, that is the reason why number of people employed in agriculture is also coming down. Number of people employed in agriculture also is coming down. That is what he talks about. And then, as I said, this green revolution had become greed revolution. They wanted more profits in short period of time. So that is the reason why this excess use of fertilizers, chemicals and pesticides, it is causing harm to consumers also. It is causing harm to consumers. We are not able to get agriculture products free of these dangerous chemicals, fertilizers. People in urban areas are also suffering. Why? Because whatever the agricultural products that are coming to urban areas, they are completely unhealthy. Why? Because, as we have said, the green revolution had resulted in greed revolution. You take the case of vegetables. These vegetables had to come from rural areas to urban areas to remain fresh. When you go to these supermarkets, you can find them so green. How can they remain fresh? By using dangerous chemicals and pesticides. Similarly, you take the case of fruits. What do these people do? They use chemicals to keep these fruits fresh. And that is the reason why people in urban areas are also facing health problems. Especially when it is related to vegetables and fruits. If you smell any of the vegetables that you buy from the market, you can see that one. If you smell, The kind of smell that comes, you can easily find out that they are using lot of these dangerous chemicals and the other pesticides and fertilizers to keep them fresh. Obviously, this is resulting in malnourishment also. As I said, it's a vicious cycle from producers to consumers, everything. It is resulting in malnourishment. People in urban areas, they are not able to get a healthy food, and not only because this is what is happening to people within the country, and that is the reason why we are not able to export also our agriculture products. Why? Because Western countries have very much stricter norms for importing food, fruits and other agricultural items. Most of the Western countries have banned Indian products for the simple reason that our farmers are using too much of fertilizers, pesticides and other dangerous chemicals. It has impacted our foreign trade also. Most of the Western countries have banned Indian fruits, mangoes. Why? Because they do not adhere to the strict health parameters of those countries. In India, we have no option. That is the reason why we keep on consuming them. It is impacting our health also. So this is what what you call the entire thing is what is called a vicious cycle. Once we understand this vicious cycle, as I said, all the topics in the syllabus, they look so many, but we can come out with very effective solutions. We can always come out with very effective solutions. As I said, we don't require land reforms. Land reforms are not at all useful. Whenever you talk about land reforms, you have to talk about, as I said, asset reforms. When you are talking about land reforms, you are talking about contract farming or corporate farming to ensure better linkages between industry and agriculture. Let the industrialist come and provide finances to farmer. Let him come and provide technical assistance to farmer. Let him come and set up these warehouses, cold storage houses and storage houses, and let the farmer also benefit out of it. That is where we talk about food processing industry. India is the largest producer of say milk in the world, second largest producer of fruits, and then in terms of poultry also, in terms of fish also, our production is one of the highest in the world. But why we are not able to benefit out of it? Why? Because food processing industry in India is almost absent. We can say that compared to our neighbors, compared to small countries, compared to very small countries in the world, we talk about the dairy production, milk, but we are not the largest exporter of milk products. Which country is the largest exporter of milk products? Small country like Belgium. Not India, nor China. They are the ones. Why? Because as I said, food processing industry in India is conspicuously absent. We don't have any food processing industry. We use only 10% of our food. 90% of it is wasted. Take the case of vegetables or fruits. 90% of it is wasted, it never comes to the market. Why? Because we don't have cold storage facilities. We don't have a farmer industry linkage. We don't have food processing industries, and we don't have transportation facilities. These are all simple things. As I said, economy, entire economy is all about common sense. What we see in our day-to-day life is what is economy. The only thing is that we should be able to empathize with all these things. If we are able to empathize with the problems of our farmers who are working at the ground level. How many of you have seen farming at the ground level in villages? Actual direct experience with farming. So that is where the problem is. If you know about these things, Even I don't know about these things, but I studied about all these things in my post-graduation. In my post-graduation in economics, my specialization was agriculture. So I used to go to villages, and we used to have tours of these villages where you find actually the problems faced by the people at the ground level. Those problems cannot be seen in the textbooks. That is where the issue here is. That is where policies are a failure. The person sitting in the agriculture ministry, in the central secretariat in Delhi, does not know the problems faced by the farmers at the ground level. The agriculture secretary can say definitely that he cannot differentiate between what is a kharif crop and what is a rabi crop. He cannot differentiate between what is paddy and what is rice. Then only he will become agriculture secretary. The only condition for you to become agriculture secretary is you should not know anything about farming. What is the difference between paddy and rice? What is the difference between paddy and rice? That is the thing. Paddy is grown, paddy, in the farm, and you take this paddy to the rice mill. Then what you come out is rice, the refined form. As I said, 99.99% of our agriculture secretaries do not know difference between paddy and rice, and that is the reason why our agriculture sector is like this. Unfortunately, during the earlier part of independence, most of our political leaders had come from rural areas and mostly from agriculture. After some point of time, they had come from urban areas and they don't know anything about agriculture. And they are the ones who formulate the policies. Okay, that is what, take the case of Nirmala Sitharaman, finance minister. What does she know about agriculture? She studied about agriculture in London School of Economics. So that is her knowledge about agriculture, right? And she is the finance minister. She is the one who will decide how the money has to be spent. That is the reason why the government comes out with schemes like Kisan. That is where the problem is. They don't know about what are kharif crops, what are rabi crops. They don't know about as I said, dryland agriculture, watershed schemes. Only thing is that the government comes out with one scheme for everything. For example, for food processing, Pradhan Mantri program is there. Former Kisan Sampada Yojana or something, right? Yes, our Prime Minister is so fond of Hindi language that he always names every scheme in Shuddha Hindi, so that those who speak Hindi also cannot understand what it is. Okay. And he wants everyone to read also. That is what. Pradhan Mantri, another scheme is there, Krishi Sinchai Yojana for yes, water. For those people from South India who cannot understand what does it mean. Okay, that is the thing. You come out with so many schemes without ensuring their effective implementation at the ground level, and most importantly, without ensuring active participation of farmers. That is where the problem. You never go and ask them what is the government will ask industry, what is your problem and what do you want us to do, and government do the things accordingly. Government reduces income tax rates for them. Government reduces corporate tax rates for them. Government gives them all kinds of subsidies and customs and excise duties. But government will decide what farmers want without consulting them what they want at the ground level. And especially poor farmers, the question that was asked this year also in your Polity Governance paper, farmers' agitations. Whenever the farmers start agitating, the government comes out with superficial schemes like loan waivers. Every 5-6 years, the government comes out with the scheme loan waivers, writing of the loans, which ruin the banking system, which will not benefit the farmers at all. This is what we will be studying about agriculture. all these things. As I said, this is the most important, interesting aspect also. In fact, what I am thinking is that, when we start our classes, we can start with agriculture for a change. It will be more interesting. You can empathize with it. Rest of things are very easy. This government budgeting, inclusive growth, and planning, then industrial policies, infrastructure policies. There is not much of analysis is there. Mostly they are factual based. What I will have to do is that I will have to give the facts. I will have to talk about what are the policies of the government, what can be done. Whereas in agriculture, it can be made more what we call emotional. That is where I think it can be made more interesting also. So this is how we will be doing the things, right? And we can start our classes. We will have 3 days in a week classes. Classes will be 3 days in a week. It will be on Tuesdays, then Thursday and Saturday. 3 days in a week classes. And by December 10th, we will finish all these classes. So that both for your prelims as well as mains, it will be sufficient. And what we will do in that in January is, we'll have to have separate classes for economic survey and budget, because that is very, very important from your pre-point of view also, economic survey and budget. Otherwise, whatever we'll be discussing before December 10th, that will be more than sufficient for your examination. And as I said that UPSC is focusing more on agriculture. Rest of the things, fiscal policies, monetary policies, budgets, planning, then Niti Aayog, and then industrial policies, investment models, infrastructure. These are not that much difficult. Power sector, you will complete it in 1 day. And railways, you can complete it in 1 day. And then airports, you don't require 1 day also, half an hour is required. Because airports have only problems and there are no solutions. Okay. So you only talk about problems and more problems. And then roadways, half an hour, because there are no roads. So not much is there, as I said. Rest of the things, then we can, from prelims point of view, you have to talk about a little bit more. Basically, in prelims, the questions mostly about fiscal policies, monetary policies, investment, inclusive growth, then economic indicators, basically mostly economic survey kind of things. So what we will be doing is that we will also be, as a part of our classes, as and when we discuss a particular topic, I will also talk about the questions that have been mentioned, in the topic, from the topic, in both prelims as well as mains, so that you can identify with them better. And again in January, when I take up economic survey and budget and other things, I will focus more on prelims, because that is the time when you will be preparing for prelims. As I said, our objective is that you have to get 100% of questions in prelims right. Again, as I said, in prelims, when we are talking about these topics, we are covering this economic geography also. One of the parts of your geography in prelims, basically related to, as I said, energy, ports, railways, roadways, power sector, and all these things. Again, they are mostly facts. There is not much of analysis there. And we only have to talk about the different policies of the government, what are the weaknesses in those policies, and what are the solutions. That is what we will be doing. So this is what, and this is how we will be proceeding. If you have any doubts, you can ask.
So then what is the role of DSAT, NAFED, ICAR and KD?
Yes, that is what I am saying. That is what I am saying. All these institutions are there. They carry out the ground level surveys. By what extent farmers are benefiting? To what extent farmers are, if they are carrying out ground level surveys and doing extensive research and all these things, why farmers are committing suicide? The problem is that they perform activities which are technical in nature. Problems of farmer are economic and social. Maximum number of, since the beginning of 2000s, in the last 15 years, more than 2.5 lakh farmers have committed suicide. 250,000 of farmers committed suicide. What is the role of ICRISAT here? They don't do anything. They cannot do anything. Why they have committed suicide? For the simple reason that financial. And all those farmers who have committed suicide, the average loan taken by them is around 35,000 rupees. All those farmers who have committed suicide, average amount of loan, for 35,000 rupees they have committed suicide. And the worst part of it is, the next statement, all those farmers have taken loans from public sector banks. They did not commit suicide because they have taken loans from money lenders. All of them have taken loans from public sector banks. Banks were running after them like hell, asking them to repay the loans. They could not withstand the pressure of the banks, and that is the reason why they committed suicide. So the government knows all these things, but the government pretends that they don't know any of these things. Why? Because small and marginal farmer is never a powerful vote bank or a pressure group for the government. All the farming policies, agricultural policies, are hijacked by rich farmers. That is where the problem is. That is the reason why whenever the government, whenever farmer suicide topic come up, the government immediately comes out with loan waivers. Okay, this year they have written off the loan. What about next year? Next year banks will say that we will not give you loan. And on the other hand, banks will collapse. That is where the problem is. And we have all these institutions. The problem is that all these institutions function independently. Without, banks do not have any, interaction with ICRISAT, NAFED. All of them function independently. Whereas farmers' problems are integrated. They are all interrelated, which they do not, which nobody finds. In a political executive, as I said, subsidies. We know what is the problem. When the government is spending 80,000 crores of rupees on fertilizer subsidies, farmers directly receive only 14,000 crores of rupees. Remaining 64,000 crores goes into the hands of corrupt and inefficient fertilizer plants, which are there both in public sector as well as private sector. Everyone knows the problem. As I said, nobody wants to find a solution. The problem is very much simple here. If you can make these fertilizer plants efficient, then you can reduce your subsidies by 64,000 crores. No government is willing to do that. That is where the problem is. So that is the reason why our Prime Minister comes out with innovative solutions like green coating. What is that? Yes, of these fertilizers, so that they are not diverted for other purposes. That is not the solution. The problem is the 64,000 crores. And the government tells that we have spent 80,000 crores of rupees on fertilizer subsidies. Our government is farmer friendly. Is it farmer friendly here? It is inefficient public sector enterprise friendly. Even in the private sector also, these fertilizer companies are highly inefficient. Why? Because they don't have to be efficient. Why? We will be discussing all those things. Every problem, when the problems are very much clear, the only thing is that no government is interested in coming out with, central government, when the farmers are committing suicide, the finance minister, union agriculture minister says that agriculture is part of state list, what can we do? That is what he says. We cannot do. What can I do? The role of the central government is limited. Then why do you have agriculture ministry at the central level? What is it doing? That is what they say. And the state governments will say that central government controls everything. They have not given us subsidies on time. Everyone blames the other person. And nobody is ready to take the help of. Even now also, on an average, every day you find hundreds of farmers committing suicide. Every day. They are committing suicide in the wealthy regions, Punjab. They are committing suicide regularly in Maharashtra. Even in the present elections also. It is not an issue because in Maharashtra, these cooperatives have become so strong. They completely subjugated the interests of farmers, Vidarbha region. And Karnataka, they commit suicide. After the formation of Telangana, more farmers committed suicide before the creation of Telangana. That is what happens. And what is the solution? Give more money. Instead of addressing these basic issues. That is where the problem is. So this is what, as I said, we will be discussing. And if you have any doubts, you can ask. This is how we will be proceeding. As I said, we can start with agriculture because that is the most important part of our syllabus. 5 questions are out of 10, 5 are asked only from agriculture. And whatever I will be discussing or dictating in the class, that should be more than sufficient. The notes, as I said, your notes cannot be more than 100 pages because you cannot read. I will try to make sure that you have it is around 70, 80 pages only. Because what is the point? You are not doing a PhD in agriculture, or you are not doing PhD in public finance or international trade. Not required. You require only that kind of knowledge, functional knowledge, which is necessary for you to write very good answers. And that is the reason why we will not go too much technical also. Economics is like an ocean. The more you go inside it, the more depth you will find, and you will never come out also. So let us stay at the periphery only. Nobody studied economics in depth and had come out also. So it's not required. As I said, the basic temptation is that you try to learn as much technical things as possible, which UPSC will never touch. It gives you so much of materialistic satisfaction. It is saying that I have studied about marginal lending rates and all these things. I know about the definition of marginal standing facility, MSF. What is the use? It will never be asked. So what is the point of reading all those things? That is the reason why you should know what to read. And you should know, more importantly, what not to read. That is very, very important. Otherwise, you have the temptation to read everything, to go through everything, which is not required. What UPSC is looking for you is analysis from you, not theoretical knowledge. You can say that I know about LAF, liquidity adjustment facility, or margin standing facility. You can talk about the differences between long-term, short-term, medium-term interest rates. You can talk about recent amendments to RBI's monetary policy with micro details. What is the use? Even RBI is not interested in those details. And you can talk about the press conferences of our finance minister. Nowadays, she is only addressing press conferences because she does not know how to tackle the economic problems, so she is addressing press conferences saying that everything is fine. Even if it is not fine, it is fine. You know, that is what. So it is not required at all. Only thing is that at the end of the day, whatever that is being written in the newspapers, newspapers are written for only general public, not for experts. You should be able to understand those things. Even if the articles are written by experts, you should be able to understand. That is what, when I say functional knowledge, that is what is only required and nothing else. Otherwise, if you want me to teach all econometric models also, which RBI uses, which Ministry of Finance applies, I will do that. No problem for me. Because all my life I studied only those econometric models only. Using complex mathematical equations and statistics. That also we can do. And we will have at least 1000 pages notes using complex mathematical models, which will put RBI governor to shame also with the kind of technical knowledge you will be having. And at the end of the day, you will become economist only. Who is an economist? Unemployed person who gives advices to other people regarding how to get employment. You don't want that kind of situation, I am sure. Right. So this is what we are doing, and so we will be meeting on Tuesday, and we'll be starting with agriculture. As I said, the most important part of your syllabus. And the class timings will be 11:30 to 2. And since all the topics in agriculture are very general in nature, we can discuss the things in a much more speedier manner also.